Let's hear a summary of motivational book Art of Public Speaking Training in public speaking isn't a matter of external factors. It doesn't calculate on imitating the topmost or conforming to the norms of society. Public speaking is about the man himself. It's about the communication he's uttering that must be good of being given. Unless there's commodity of value within, no tips or tricks of training can perfect the delivery of a speech. Thus, training for public speaking must begin with tone development and disposition. Also, no quantum of rules regarding voice culture, accentuation, and gesture will have meaning unless you have commodity to say that has the power to inspire, influence, and bring people together. At the end of the day, no bone can learn how to speak. Rather, one must jump by and learn through experience. Experience, also, isn't only the stylish school teacher but the first and last. Through experience, we've the occasion to condense, correct, and justify. We also must be trained in tone knowledge and have the capability to judge ourselves by the norms we've come to believe are right. Thus, learning the styles presented in this book will simply come secondary matters. It's the full mind and a warm heart that are primary and consummate, for unless it be a full being that uses the styles, it'll be like dressing a rustic image in the clothes of a man. Chapter 1 Conquer Stage Fright. Numerous scholars of public speaking continuously ask, how can I overcome tone knowledge and the fear that paralyzes me before unfollowership? Suppose about this. Why is it that some people are confident when diving into the deep end of the pool while others are reluctant, anxious, and spooked? It's because of practice. You can read all the books and learn all the tips of public speaking, but if you no way dive in, you'll no way overcome the fear. Being stage fright is a fear that's known to numerous popular public speakers, and some master speakers no way entirely overcome the fear. For illustration, Daniel Webster came so nervous during his first speech that he had to take a seat before finishing it because he was so nervous. Also, great speakers like British statesman William Gladstone and American clergyman Henry Ward Beecher frequently came nervous before speeches. So the first step in learning the art is to become absorbed by your subject. If you feel deeply about your subject, you'll be suitable to suppose of little additional. In other words, attention allows us to distract ourselves from less important matters like how your hair and fleece look while standing at the tribune. Overcome your passions of tone knowledge by simply consuming your mind with studies about your content. Next, it's inversely important to have commodity to say. It's not simply enough to be absorbed by your subject, you must also have confidence in what you're saying. Numerous speakers make the mistake of approaching the tribune with little medication or former knowledge on the subject. However, also you'll clearly feel tone conscious. You ought to be shamed to steal the time of your followership if you make this mistake. Rather, prepare yourself by knowing what you're going to talk about and how you're going to say it. Incipiently, after preparing for success, anticipate it. However, success will come if you prepare for success. Of course, this doesn't mean that you should be overbold, rather, you should exercise true modesty. It's not the type of modesty in which you come demure and groveling, but rather a strong, vibrant modesty that opens you up for lesser power of service. In fact, demure modesty means that you believe that you'll fail, and if you believe this, also there's no stopgap for you. You'll fail. Rather, suppose of yourself as someone with horizontal capabilities that you can master through practice. So while you may feel as if you're drowning at first, keep rehearsing and soon you'll be swimming with ease. Chapter 2 The Sin of Monotony. Imagine hearkening to the same song over and over again. After a while, the song will come sensationalized and you'll get tired of the same tune, the same pitch, and the same words. Simply put, it becomes monotonous. The same can be said of the speaker who gives his speech by droning along in the same volume and pitch of tone and uses the same emphasis, speed, and studies. Imagine how boring it would be to hear to a speaker without variation in his or her voice. At the end of the day, humdrum is deadly. Not only is humdrum deadly, but it also reveals our limitations. However, it points to the fact that the rest of his powers aren't developed if a speaker uses only a many of his powers. So how can you ensure that you don't commit the sin of humdrum? The first step in giving a dynamic speech is emphasis. Let's take a look at the following judgment. Fortune isn't a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. Speak it audibly. Which words do you emphasize? Naturally, you'll emphasize fortune since it's the subject of the judgment. Next, you'll emphasize not so you don't confuse your listeners into allowing fortune as a matter of chance. And of course, you'll want to emphasize chance, for it's one of the two big ideas in the statement and you'll want to emphasize its discrepancy to choice in the coming judgment. Still, let's flash back that emphasizing a word doesn't mean that you're simply speaking louder. To yell isn't a sign of intentness, intelligence, or feeling. Sure, emphatic words may be spoken more loudly, but they may also be spoken more vocally. Still, the real quality asked is the intensity that comes from within. Thus, changing your pitch is the first fashion in creating variety and emphasizing your central communication. Next, you'll want to change your pace and pause. Changing your tempo will go a long way towards establishing variety. In fact, Mr. Howard Lindsay, a stage director for actress Miss Margaret Anglin, formerly said that a change of pace was one of the most effective tools for the actor. Naturally, we pick up the pace when delivering instigative news and decelerate down when delivering important data. And eventually, you'll want to incorporate pauses for dramatic effect. Maybe consider breaking before delivering an important word or expression, or rushing through the less important material in your speech before decelerating down to enunciate the critical crucial corridor. At the end of the day, it's important to flash back that you shouldn't allow your movement to come too presto. This is a common mistake for numerous amateur speakers. Rather, take your time, add variety, and use emphasis to avoid committing the monotonous deadly sin. Chapter 3: The Importance of Arousing Emotion. Imagine two people giving a speech on the same subject of child labor. The job of the speakers would be to inspire their followership to bounce for a measure that would abolish child labor. So how does a speaker do this? They must strike at their passions. Imagine the first person giving that speech is a white politician, someone who constantly fights for the rights of slaves. Still, the other speaker is a black mama who has just seen her children vended into slavery from the transaction block. Whose speech would you be more likely to hear to? The mama didn't have the fashion of speaking, but she had commodity, indeed lesser commodity, further effective than reason feeling. The stylish speeches in the world are charged with emotional force. That's because passions guide us through life. They're the reason that we lie on soft beds, sit near the fireplace on cold days, eat cherry pie, and indeed drink lemonade on a scorching hot day. We don't do these effects out of sense and reason but because they feel right. Our passions mandate what we shall eat and generally how we should act. As Carnegie states, man is a feeling beast, hence the speaker's capability to arouse men to action depends nearly wholly on his capability to touch their feelings. So how can you ensure that you give your speeches with feeling? No matter the cause you're re-arguing or the speech you're giving, it's important to develop enthusiasm by getting your subject. You must enter into the character you impersonate, the cause you endorse, or the case you argue. You must enter it so deeply that it clothes you, enthralls you, and possesses you wholly. For illustration, Emerson formerly explained that no painter could draw a tree without in some kind getting a tree, or draw a child by simply studying the face and outlines. Rather, a painter must watch the child and his movements, the same way he'd enter nature to draw the tree. This is easier said than done, so what exactly does all this mean? Simply put, you must pretend that you're an actor, speaking through your character. Transfigure yourself into your subject and you'll be suitable to inspire both emotion and action from your listeners. Chapter 4: Health. Importance of Gesticulation. Imagine the tree in your front yard. The bone that isn't growing how you would like it to. Every day you fertilize it, water the soil, and let the tree have its sun. But still, it isn't growing duly. Obviously, you can't just nail many branches to the tree hoping that commodity will grow from them. Rather, it's the inside that matters. Also, gestures when giving speeches must be born, not erected. But what exactly does this mean? Suppose about this. The speaker whose studies and feelings are welling within him like a mountain spring won't have important trouble making gestures. They will come from within. They will come as a natural impulse. On the other hand, those who simply method on movements will look much analogous to the tree in which you nailed on its branches, a simulation. For illustration, if you watch the same speaker give a speech doubly, you'll notice that his gestures are different each time. That's because his gestures are grounded solely on his emotion, mood, and impulse. Still, while gestures clearly come from the robotic emotion that you feel, that doesn't mean that you can't exercise them. So to avoid awkwardly waving throughout your speech, begin by rehearsing descriptive, suggestive, and typical movements until they come as naturally as good articulation. You could also try watching yourself in a glass, noting which movements are awkward and rehearsing them until your gesture change becomes organic and natural. While we on the subject, let's talk about which movements you should avoid. Don't make short, jerky movements. Rather, let your movements be easy and come from the shoulder rather than the elbow. Of course, don't go too extreme and include too numerous flowing movements moreover. Next, you'll want to avoid too important gesture. When we go through a major extremity in life, we infrequently go through it with important action. For illustration, when you hear the news of your close friend's death, you don't just throw your hands up in the air and start lamenting your grief. Rather, let your movements be easy and come from the shoulder rather than the elbow. Of course, don't go too extreme and include too numerous flowing movements moreover. Next, you'll want to avoid too important gesture. When we go through a major extremity in life, we infrequently go through it with important action. For illustration, when you hear the news of your close friend's death, you don't just throw your hands up in the air and start lamenting your grief. Rather, you're likely to go sit still in posterity in dry-eyed silence until the shock wears off. Also, when giving a speech, too important gesture will feel disingenuine and distracting. So do your stylish to avoid gratuitous gesture. You should also pay attention to the strength, poise, inflexibility, and grace of your body. These are the foundations of good gesture. Exercise by walking and standing before the glass to conquer your awkwardness, and if you aren't naturally graceful, practice by dancing, doing yoga, or exercising. The thing is to get grace and poise in your mind. Incipiently, keep your facial expressions in mind as well and be sure that your posture and your expression match the character of your speech. Chapter 5. A good voice comes from good health. A critic for the London Times formerly declared that acting is 9/10 voice work, and the same could be said for public speaking. A rich, rightly used voice is the topmost physical factor of conclusiveness and power. In other words, your voice is important and has the power to move your followership. Gladstone himself formerly stated, 90 men in every 100 in the crowded professions will presumably nowhere rise above mediocrity because the training of the voice is entirely neglected and considered of no significance. Suppose about that. Of course, there are ways that you can work on your voice. The secret to a good voice is relaxation, and relaxation is the base of ease, our first abecedarian needful for a good voice. So try this. Contract your muscles of the face and throat as you do in hate and honey out, I detest you. Now relax as you do when allowing gentle, tender studies, and say, I love you. How different does your voice sound? When rehearsing voice exercises, it's important to no way force your tones. You must ease your voice. After all, it's a delicate instrument that must be handled with care. So how can you exercise relaxation and ease? Try this exercise. Hold your arm out straight from the shoulder. Now, withdraw that power and let it fall. Next, practice relaxation for your throat muscles by letting your neck and head fall forward. Roll the upper part of your body around, with the midriff acting as a pivot. Let your head fall and roll around as you shift the torso to different positions. Try not to force your head around, simply relax your neck and let graveness pull it around as your body moves. Next, practice relaxing your throat by beginning to nudnik. But rather of yawning, speak while your throat is open. This will allow you to increase your volume and enrich your tone. When completing this exercise, some notice that their tone passages are incompletely closed by enlarged tonsils, adenoids, or enlarged turbinate bones of the nose. However, also you should consult a croaker, if this is the case for you. Next, let's bandy how to carry your voice forward. You can tell whether you're placing your tone forward or not by gobbling a deep breath and singing ah with the mouth wide open. Try to feel the delicate sound swell strike the bony bow of your mouth just above the frontal teeth. It's a slight sensation, but as you practice, you'll notice the feeling of your voice striking the roof of your mouth. You can continue to exercise this by holding the wing of your hand in front of your face and saying the words crash, gusto, whirl, and buzz. Can you feel the forward tone strike against your hand? Exercise until you can. Eventually, you should develop the carrying power of your voice. When speaking to a big followership, it's not always necessary to speak louder so the people in the reverse can hear you. Rather, it's about moving your voice forward. And the veritably base of this practice is your breath, which comes from good health. A successful speaker formerly developed his voice carrying power by running across the country and rehearsing his speeches as he went. This exercise forced him to take deep breaths and helped develop his lung power. You can exercise by placing your hands on your midriff. Take a deep breath, fastening the exertion of your breath in the center of your body. Do not raise your shoulders. As the breath is taken, your hands will be forced out. Repeat this exercise by placing your hands on the small of the reverse and forcing them out as you gobble. Chapter 6. Turn your audience into a crowd. When it comes to the crowd, they hold great power. While each existent may have his own special interests and requirements, there's power in one common idea that unifies them. Nationalism, hate, a common fear, are each popular motifs that unify its individualities. You see, crowds are most susceptible to emotion, they want to feel commodity, but you can also unite members by the way you arrange them. Still, you'll be suitable to successfully produce a mob intelligence, if you arrange your followership so that they form like a crowd. You know the power of the mob, as John Ruskin formerly put it, you can talk a mob into anything it thinks by infection. For the utmost part, catching an opinion like a cold wave, this means you'll be more likely to impact your followership if they're arranged like a crowd and can fluently catch one another's opinions. History shows us the power of how the crowd mind workshop. Suppose about the witch quest in Salem, Massachusetts. People were so told by the mob intelligence of its citizens that people were quick to make allegations about witches without any evidence or merit. The crowd is a force to be reckoned with, and we should learn how to use it to our advantage. So how can you turn your followership into a crowd? Simply by unifying the minds and requirements of the followership and arousing their feelings. Their passions, not their reasons, must be played upon. The crowd spirit cannot be created if you don't appeal to the crowd's feelings first. However, let's take a look at the power of applause, if you are still not induced of the power of the crowd. Applause in itself helps unify and followership. For illustration, once a crowd of people in New York were watching a moving picture and had been saluting several songs. All of unforeseen, a simple announcement for acclimatized skirts was thrown up onto the screen, some started the applause, and the crowd, like lamb, blindly imitated. We also see this moment at musicals or movie theaters. However, the rest of the crowd will probably follow, if one person in the crowd begins to crack during silence. At the end of the day, it's hard to inflame enthusiasm if the followership is scattered over a large seating space with empty benches that separate the speaker from his listeners. Have your followership seated curtly and you'll find that your communication has the power to spread like a contagion. Chapter 7. The foundation of your speech relies on the strength of your arguments. No matter how important practice and conviction you put into your speech, it'll fail every time if you're unfit to refute the arguments that numerous might use against you. When expressing your opinion and point of view, there will always be others who see the other side. So before we can become a successful quarreler, we will need to suppose about how we can do two effects: make up an argument and also tear it down. In other words, you must be suitable to examine the stability of the structure of your argument, so that it may be probative and sound. It's also important, still, to describe the blights in your argument so that you'll be suitable to demolish the weaker bones of those who argue against you. According to the author, every argument has four corridors: the question under discussion, the substantiation, the logic, and inferences. However, you'll need to test your argument by assaying these four corridors if you want to ensure that your argument is strong. For the question under discussion, you'll first want to ask yourself, is the argument easily stated? This means assuming that all the terms in the statement mean the same to each fighter. For illustration, the meaning of the term gentleman may not be mutually agreed upon. Next, ask yourself if your argument is stated fairly. Does it include too important or too little? Does the expression contain a trap of some kind? For the substantiation of the argument, you must first ask yourself about the authorities and experts cited as substantiation. Is the authority well honored? What constitutes him as an authority? What makes him an expert on the subject? Are his opinions unprejudiced and clear? Ensure that the sources cited are dependable and unbiased. Next, you'll want to look at the data that you present as substantiation. Are they sufficient enough to constitute evidence? Is there enough? Do they support or contradict one another? And incipiently, are they verified or debatable? Next, let's look at the logic for your argument. First, ask yourself if the fact you presented might support a different conclusion from the one you re-emulation. Have you overlooked any antithetical data? Are the counterarguments fairly weak? Have you accepted bare opinions as data? Suppose about all the ways the data you presented could be used against you. Incipiently, take a look at the consequences. Have you been shamefaced of stating a conclusion that doesn't follow? This is also known as a non sequitur. And do all your pieces of substantiation harmonize with one another? Flashback, you don't want to simply prepare to present your own argument. You also need to prepare for all the ways in which others might be suitable to tear it down. Chapter 8, The Importance of Using Your Imagination. Creating a satisfying argument is the foundation for giving a productive speech. Still, simply giving a speech that's full of figures and statistics will surely put your followership to sleep. Rather, you should employ the power of imagination. What exactly is imagination? According to the author, the imagination is either the faculty or the process of forming internal images. So how can you get your followership to form an internal image? The first step in employing the power of imagination is learning how to use topological language. For illustration, let's say you're arguing that drunkenness is the number one cause for destroying families' lives. Sure, you could stand before your followership and list off a bunch of figures and statistics to prove your point, but what good would that do? Rather, use topological language and produce a story. Tell the story of the man who comes home drunk from the bar each day, only to yell at his woman and hit his children. Fill it with numbers of speech like analogies, conceits, elaborations, and ironies. This will probably snare the followership's attention while also keeping them interested in the rest of your speech. Next, you can use your imagination by employing the use of imaging in public speaking. Begin by setting the image of your followership before you while you prepare. While you see and be prepared for every exigency, you can be more set by meeting your followership before you actually do. Imagine the mood and station toward the occasion as well as the theme of your speech. Next, imagine the language you'll use. Flashback that an address without fresh comparisons is like a theater within blooms, so imagine the language and work on it until vividly real comparisons come to mind. Incipiently, you'll want to imagine speech delivery. Suppose about what you'll say, how you'll deliver it, and what types of gestures you might want to use. However, you'll be less likely to forget commodity and be more likely to give a successful, satisfying speech if you can picture your speech in your head. All in all, master your images, let not them master you. Chapter 9, Final Summary. To become a master of public speaking, you must be willing to do 3 effects: practice, practice, practice. Simply put, practice is the only way that you'll overcome your fear of public speaking and become the stylish. Of course, Carnegie has laid out the numerous tips and ways you need to help you succeed. First, you'll want to avoid humdrum by using emphasis to add variety to your speech. Next, arouse emotion from your followership and let your gestures flow from the heart. Exercise your gesture and the protuberance of your voice through the numerous exercises Carnegie has handed. Also, you'll want to turn your followership into a crowd by placing them strategically together to help them form a mob intelligence. Incipiently, you'll want to prepare for all crimes by testing your arguments and using imagery to help you deliver a compelling and formative communication.